All right, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our DataBytes session on enrollment updates. Welcome to 2023 and the spring semester. Hope the new year and the new term are going well for everyone so far. I've got some updates to share today on our progress so far this year on enrollment and um, some kind of early data that we can share about the spring term as we are working our way into the early phases of the spring 2023 semester. So first off, I wanted to take a peek at where we've been over the last few years as a college with COVID and the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic on the higher ed space and on the economy, and where that's kind of left us as a college and how things are shaping up for us as we are emerging from the pandemic and starting to move back into a bit of a normal trajectory with our enrollment patterns. So where have we been? Where are we going? As many of you may hopefully recall, right before the pandemic in fall 2019, Rio had, for the first time in quite some time, started to see some enrollment increases compared to years prior. So back in 2011, 2012, many institutions across the country, Rio no exception, kind of peaked in terms of enrollment. This was the result of things like the recession and folks, shifting into the higher ed space to try and re-career after so many downturns in the economy. And so, around that time, many colleges, especially community colleges and two-year institutions, tended to kind of peak in terms of their enrollment, and that was true both of Rio and the Maricopa district as well. Since that time, we had kind of seen a decline in enrollment. Rio had experienced a much more rapid decline than many of our peers or competitors, in many instances due to the proliferation of online education and losing some of that competitive advantage that we had historically as being one of the front runners in that space. But then in fall 2019, we had started to achieve a bit of a recovery, which was unfortunately then thwarted very shortly thereafter with the spring 2020 semester and the COVID-19 pandemic. So as you can see in the chart here, I've got graphed some of the year-over-year enrollment changes for the last 4 fall semesters for Rio Salado College, which is the blue column, Maricopa County Community College District overall, which is the red kind of bar, and then the green bar are public two-year community college data that were made available to us from the National Student Clearinghouse. And I think what you can see is that moving through the pandemic and then kind of into the late pandemic, as I've termed it here on my slide, in fall 2021, Rio was hit a little bit harder than others. There was fewer students to go around. There was a lot of economic uncertainty, and dissimilar from what we'd seen in the past, where when the economy tends to turn downward, many folks return to higher ed to try and find new jobs or new skills. That didn't really happen this time around. Public two-year institutions specifically were hit really hard with the pandemic. Many students who continued on in higher ed chose to go to a four-year institution or some sort of other trade school or private option. And so community colleges were really kind of hit hard. And on top of that, we had a pretty heavy shift in um, programming towards online course offerings from other competitors that maybe hadn't been in that space before. So it's kind of a perfect storm that stacked up against Rio in terms of us taking quite a big hit in terms of our enrollment levels throughout the duration of the pandemic. As we're seeing some of the effects of the pandemic start to wane, we are starting to see a quicker resurgence of our online population and other populations, especially when we look at ourselves compared to others around the sector. So for the fall 2022, we ended up in terms of our enrollment about 8.5%, which far surpassed the Maricopa Community College District overall. We'll talk a little bit more about that on the next slide in terms of our impact on Maricopa's numbers. And many other public two-year institutions around the country still haven't yet regained their foothold in terms of where they've been pre-pandemic and trying to get back to that space. Arizona is fortunate to be one of only 15 states, according to the National Student Clearinghouse, who have witnessed an enrollment increase in fall 2022. So I think with population shift and folks continuing to come to the Phoenix metro area, we're fortunately on the benefiting end of that equation as we continue to see more students locally who are looking for those opportunities, especially with a dynamic economy that we've got here. So in terms of our fall 2022 numbers, we know now that we saw those increases come to us throughout the fall. We were serving more students, those students were enrolled in more courses, and those courses were worth more credits. And so those were all good things for us in terms of our numbers and trying regaining some of that territory and some of that footing that we had lost as a result of the pandemic. Jumping around a little bit, you can see there in the middle of the slide, I've got some breakdowns by the types of courses or the modality of the courses that were offered throughout the fall and where the numbers broke down. So for dual enrollment, courses for students who are taking dual enrollment high school courses tended to be our most significant enrollment bucket throughout the fall term. This is a pretty new trend for us. Dual enrollment has always been really strong for the college, but typically online has still been the primary course modality for the college. Over the last couple of fall semesters, we started to see dual enrollment, especially starting to tick upwards in that space. Dual enrollment for the first time this fall is serving over last fall was serving 9,000 students, and so that was a new milestone for them. And with those increases, we're starting to see dual enrollment courses taking over more and more of the total footprint of the college enrollment mix. Online courses accounted for almost 30% of enrollments, but ended up just a little bit shy of where we were the previous fall in terms of our online space. And then ESP enrollments made up the majority of the remainder of the enrollments, with hybrid and in-person and correspondence courses contributing to the final 10%. In terms of where students were coming to us from, the majority, as you can imagine, with all those dual enrollment students, were coming from Maricopa County. In alignment with that increase in dual enrollment mix, we have seen more and more students from Maricopa County in recent terms than we have historically. We've also been serving more partnerships in terms of out-of-state offerings, and so many of you might be familiar with the Guild partnership. As a result of onboarding that partnership for the fall, we started to see a bit of an uptick in terms of our metrics around those out-of-state populations, both in terms of the efficiency in getting them through the admissions process, getting them enrolled in more courses, and getting them on track to complete a degree or certificate with the college. And so those are all exciting signs. A preview for that is that we've got about 300 Guild students enrolled already for the spring 23 semester. So we're seeing increases with that population and continuing momentum with that student group as we move forward and continue to mature that relationship with that partner. Shifting down to student demographics, we had an interesting mix in our fall 2022 kind of snapshot. We did see an increase in the number or the representation of students of color who are enrolled with the institution. More and more, we're seeing that students of color tend to make up the majority of students who have reported a racial or ethnic group with the college. And that's evidenced, of course, as well by our recent HSI designation or Hispanic Serving Institution designation. We recently resubmitted the eligibility application for that, and we're pleased to announce that we've been rewarded again and are eligible again to continue to go after those Title V and Title III grants that come with that eligibility. 37% of our students were first generation college students or the first in their family to attend an institution of higher ed, and about 28% or close to 30% were new to college. And so those are all important for us as in the work that we do and being such a non-traditional institution, our student population tends to be hallmarked by its diversity and its uniqueness in terms of the underserved mix of students that we have. And so these are important factors for us to take into consideration as we're designing strategies to intervene with students and educate them and make them successful. Our average student age slipped a little bit. We've had an increase in dual enrollment enrollments, and so with that, a younger student population. So we saw our average age shrink from about 26 last fall to 24 this fall. In terms of admissions, we did receive more applications this fall as compared to last fall. Close to 16,000 applications this year as compared to about 13,500 last year, with a conversion rate just shy of 52%. That resulted in us receiving um, just over 8,000 new students to the college, which was, if I recall, about 1,500 more than what we saw last fall. The one downside to that is that we did leave some students on the table, and so that's always an opportunity for us to try and re-engage those students and get them re-enrolled for future semesters. I included a couple other interesting points down there in the bottom right-hand corner just to kind of quantify our Maricopa impact. In general, Rio, 1 out of 5 students that attended the Maricopa Community College District in fall 2022 was a Rio student, which I think is a pretty cool soundbite and takeaway. Many of our students we know do swirl around some of the other campuses, but nevertheless, 20% of the students served district-wide throughout the fall semester were attending Rio. And similar to that, about 17% of the credits attempted around the district were attempted at Rio. So as one of 10 institutions, we're carrying our weight and then some in terms of the enrollment mix of the district. I'm seeing some questions pop off in the chat, and the way that WebEx works is I can't see them too well. So bear with me for a second while I try and figure out where my controls are and get access to your questions.
Zach, I can just ask. I think I'm the only one that has a question.
Please.
Do we know what the average age is if we exclude dual?
I can certainly figure that out. Let me see.
Because we've always talked about the fact that our student population is older. And certainly it's a different strategy if that continues to be the case in the online environment. But I don't know if maybe even our online students are trending younger.
Yeah, so excluding dual for fall 2022, our average age was 30 years old.
Oh, okay. Then that is indeed still the case that we're trending quite a bit older for dual.
We're still trending quite a
If
bit
we
older.
exclude dual.
If we exclude dual, yes. For fall 2021, the average age excluding dual was also 30 years old. If we look just at online, our average age is about 28. So a couple of years younger. That might have to do with some of those specialized programs like ESP, where we know students who are enrolled through those programs are already into their careers. They're coming to us as a result of, being hired at the various partners that we work with. And so that might have some play there. But yeah, in general, we're still, 28, 30 years old and average, depending on how you slice it when you exclude dual.
Okay, thank you. So that is still the statements that we make about our students typically being older, even if we're just talking about the online population, is still true.
Still holding true. Yep. Thank you for the question. So then moving into the spring, so celebrations all around. We've done a tremendous job in the fall. We can't detract from the fact that dual certainly had an impact in the increases that we saw in the fall. We know that there are some challenges with that population, but there's also a lot of hard work that's been going into that population, the success of that team and those students. And so kudos to that group for having such a stellar an outstanding fall semester. I actually received a message at one point from one of the IR analysts at the district office who was crunching the numbers, and they just wanted to confirm that there was nothing wrong or funky about the dual numbers because they were so shocked that the dual numbers were so strong at Rio for fall 2022, and they even made the remark that it was going to be by the grace of Rio's dual program that the Maricopa district overall was going to be up in terms of enrollment for the fall semester. So all great things and all great work for that team, and kudos to them all around. So moving into the spring semester, we've got some early data. Obviously, with Rio's rolling start dates, all of this should be taken somewhat with a grain of salt, understanding that we've still got a lot of room and a lot of runway left in the spring 23 semester. But as of this past week and all the enrollment figures that came in through Saturday, we can report that right now we're serving about 13% more students than we served at the same point in time last year for the spring semester, about 15% more course enrollments, and about 12.5% more credits attempted compared to last year. So all good things. Um, there is a bit of a mismatch from last year's data to this year in that this year, leading up to the spring semester, students had more of a window, a longer window of registration open to them. So earlier on in the reporting cycle, we were seeing some of our enrollment gains, 50%, 25% higher than last year. I think that's starting to normalize a little bit now. We're seeing the reconciliation of those numbers in those time frames that we were seeing last year. But I want to just caution everyone that we're being cautiously optimistic with this information and continuing to monitor, especially as we're moving closer to the middle of the term when we start to see those enrollment numbers plateau a bit. Right now, as it stands, online courses make up about 47% of our total enrollment mix, with dual enrollment courses making up an additional 42%. Dual enrollment is up again, astronomically 25% gains for the spring 23 at this point in time compared to spring 22 last year. Um, I will also mention that we know because of peak and the burdens that we have on our enrollment and registration teams during that period, some of the more specialized programs like the prison populations and the ESP programs tend to register their students later. So we would expect that the mix of online versus dual versus ESP versus all others will continue to shift as we start to see those enrollments increasing over the coming weeks. Right now, with the student population dynamics, it tends to be pretty similar to what we saw for the fall. Maricopa County students comprise about 85% of the total student population, with national students accounting for 8%. That is a bit of an uptick from, in terms of the national representation, from what we've seen historically. And again, I think that's in large part due to the successes of the Guild partnership, at least in the early days of that partnership, and getting more and more students enrolled in classes and on path to graduation with the college. Right now, new students, students who applied for the spring semester represent about 11% of the total enrolled population, with students returning from previous semesters representing about 89% of the total population. So in terms of highlights, right now, Rio is outpacing many of our peers around the district in terms of growth. There are a couple other colleges that are experiencing an overall enrollment increase this year, but in terms of the largest volume colleges, us, Mesa, Glendale, Chandler Gilbert, we tend to be the most successful in terms of our numbers right now. Obviously, with Dual and all the successes that they've seen this year, that's helping our numbers, but we're also seeing pretty strong growth in our online population. So we're hopeful that that'll continue, especially as we continue to move deeper and deeper into all the block starts of the spring 23 semester. In terms of our admissions, things are going well for us. We're tracking right along where we want to be at this point in time for the semester. As of this point, we've received just shy of 4,000 applications. The increase compared to where we've seen the increases over the last couple of years is much more minimal. So right now we've received about 3.5% more applications at this point in time than we've received last year at the same point in time. That's great work, and kudos to Simon's team and the marketing team for continuing to create more lead generation for the college. We in previous semesters recently have seen 20%, 50% gains in terms of our applications. So I think at some point it's understandable that we're going to start to see a little bit of a diminishing return there, but still great work and trajectory there. Right now, we've achieved about a 32% conversion rate, or enrollment of new applicants for the spring semester. That's in alignment with where we typically are at this point in the semester, and we tend to bottom out, or excuse me, we tend to top out at around 50 to 55%, depending on the term. Right now, in terms of overall applicants or prospective students for the spring, 20% of those students were national or out-of-state students, and they've achieved about a 35% conversion rate, so just ahead of the overall rates. 64% are supplemental or non-credential seeking students, and they've achieved about a 31% conversion rate. That's interesting because supplemental students tend to achieve higher conversion rates They typically have fewer restrictions, if you will, uh, contingent on their enrollment, and so we tend to see them getting through the process a little quicker, and so that's an interesting trend that's unique to the spring 23 semester so far. Right now, first time in college students or students who are attending higher ed for the first time with us and just in general have the lowest conversion rates at 29%, while students who've got some college experience but have never achieved a higher education degree have the highest conversion rates, excuse me, at 46%. In terms of our opportunities, and I mentioned this with the fall data, and this is always the case, but right now we've got just shy of 2,000 students who are eligible to enroll in coursework but have not yet enrolled. We know historically that a certain percentage of those students do tend to be students who might have multi-admitted, if you will, to multiple Maricopa institutions simultaneously. And so it's understandable that some of those students are going to be enrolled just elsewhere with other institutions, but there's still an opportunity there for us to continue to engage in the outreach efforts that we've got underway with both the local team and the district outreach office to try and get those students enrolled in classes. So as we talked about with fall, as we talked about in terms of the pandemic and some of the trends that we saw during that time frame specifically, our online student population is one that is very important for the college and an area of opportunity that in my mind certainly exists for the institution as we continue to move forward and try and claw back some of those enrollments that we lost over the last several years. We've had great success with the dual enrollment population. We've had great success and continued growth with the ESP population, but online students tend to be kind of our Achilles heel right now. We've lost a lot of ground, both locally here within the district, as well as locally outside of the district in online enrollment to our competitors and our peers who are increasingly offering more and more classes and programs in this space. And we've seen the hit in our numbers over time as we've continued down the path with the pandemic and as we're starting to emerge out of the pandemic. And so this, for me, is something that I'm trying to put out there in front of more and more people, an understanding of the importance of the retention of those online students and getting them to continue on in their enrollment trajectory with the college. So we've been tracking in tandem with that, kind of a retention rate, if you will, of our online students, and tracking for the students who we know to be credential seeking. They're looking to earn a certificate or degree with the college. They're taking exclusively online classes. The students who we expect are going to be returning to take courses with us. Who of those students who were enrolled last year have not yet to re-enroll for this academic year, and how can we identify those students and get them re-engaged in their educational pursuits? So last year we had about 4,800 students who were online and credential seeking as of the beginning of the current academic year who had not yet graduated. Since then, 1,691 have since re-enrolled with the college for about a 36% retention rate. That puts us about par with where we were last year, a couple percentage points ahead. And so we want to continue to work on this to try and make sure that we're re-engaging these students. These students are kind of our most traditional students in a sense, even though they're online, which, for many other institutions around the country isn't traditional. These tend to be our most traditional students, our bread and butter students. These are the students that aren't reliant on a specific program or specialized population. These are our students who are in our general audience, if you will, and so represent, I think, the greatest opportunity to the college in terms of continuing to build on our success in our enrollment numbers and regaining some of that lost ground. Right now, about 92% of the students who have been retained are students who are seeking an associate's degree, and 37% of that total population has been retained. Only 8% of the total retained population are certificate seekers, and they've achieved about a 28% retention rate, or we've achieved about a 28% retention rate of those students. That makes sense. Degree seekers tend to have a longer trajectory, a longer life cycle with the college, whereas certificate seekers tend to be shorter turnaround. So there's some opportunities for us there to dig into that data and try and identify maybe some additional opportunities that might exist in terms of engaging those students, making sure that we've got their attention, access to them, and we're helping them to achieve their educational goals with the college, whatever those might look like. So I wanted to make sure that everyone knows where this data is, how you can find it, and how you can interact with it yourself, how you can answer some of those questions like Angela brought up about the average age of students. And to do that, I'll take us on a bit of a tour into Power BI and into our department's employee portal site. So for those of you who already know how to do this, congratulations, you're probably among the few. But right now, in terms of getting access to dashboards and some of that live reporting, your best bet is to go to powerbi.com. That's the space where we publish our dashboards and interactive data visualizations to the college. So when you go to powerbi.com, hopefully you'll be prompted with the ability to sign into your account. You want to make sure that you're signing in with your Rio internal credentials, so your first name dot last name at internal.riosoloto.edu. So once I get logged into there, you've got access to a variety of data because I've got access to all of the applications that we publish and deploy college-wide. I've got probably a lot more than you'll see on your end. But the main space where you're going to look for information related to enrollment trends and kind of that weekly monitoring is the Rio Salado College app. In here, you can find what we're calling our key metrics. So enrollment metrics week by week, admissions metrics week by week, that online retention metric that we just talked about week by week. And you can kind of drill into some of those populations, review historical data and historical trends in terms of where we were, 6 weeks ago, what have you. You can also see in here more comprehensive weekly enrollment monitoring for each semester. So here within the fall 2022 enrollment monitoring dashboard, you can see week by week where our numbers were trending, how those numbers break down in terms of where students live, what types of classes they're enrolled in, student demographics, all kinds of good stuff. We've also got the same version of that published for spring 23, and as we move closer to summer, you'll see that one pop up as well. So highly encourage everyone to take advantage of those resources. While we're in here and while we're taking a peek, when Angela was asking the question about student demographics and average age of students, I was able to just jump into the student demographics dashboard. Using the filtering options that were available, we can quickly drill down on anything that we want to know about that. So the specific question was if we were wanting to know what the average age of students were excluding dual enrollment, we can quickly click dual enrollment off of our filtering options, and we can see that for the fall 2022 semester, the average age of students not including dual enrollment was 30 years old. So quick way to find some quick answers to questions or just kind of entertain yourself with some of the data that's available in here. In terms of access to reporting, if you're not quite as comfortable with getting in here and getting your hands dirty with some of the dashboards, my team does also produce weekly PDF reports of some of those weekly key metric summaries. So if you navigate to the employee portal site into institutional research, you can see our EP site in here. There is an information and resources page where you'll find a variety of things, including the key metrics reports. The key metrics reports will show you semester by semester, week by week, just kind of some narrative elements so that you don't necessarily have to go in and be data savvy. You can get the narrative elements of some of those things like weekly enrollment, student admissions, progress on retention, and just have those snapshots available to you as well in maybe a more comfortable format depending on your use case. And just a quick plug, because this is something new that not a lot of folks have seen, we just recently published a spring, I'm just reading the words here. We've recently published a calendar of survey activities. And so here you can kind of see visually represented all the different surveys that my office coordinates when they occur throughout the year. And soon we'll be adding on a district tab to this as well. We know the district is constantly administering surveys and having opportunities that they've got to engage in student feedback mechanisms. And so we'll add a tab to this as well where you can monitor anything that might be going on at the district as well. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, come back to you all on the main screen and see if there's any questions that I missed or any questions that anyone else has before we adjourn for the day. All right. Well, I appreciate you all so much. Thank you for attending. I'll get the recording posted for others who weren't able to make it. And please let me know if there's anything else you need or anything we can do for you.
We appreciate all your